For episode 62, in the case of the Thunderkittens, they're about to learn a harsh lesson. So the story begins in the Castellar's hangar. So, in the Feeliner, we have Panthro, Chitara, Tigra, and Snarf. So the Feeliner's all set and is ready to go. So it takes off. So long story short, inside Cat's lair, there's Lionel. He's making his rounds just like any other person would do. So far, everything seemed fine, or so he thought. When Lionel turns around, he thought someone was watching him, but then he decided to think nothing of it. So he heads off. But then, what Lionel doesn't even realize is that by the moment that he left, those clothed figures were the Thunderkittens. So what they did is they went into the weapons room. So as the Thunderkittens were taking the weapons of the elders, we're talking Panthro's nunchucks, Jitar's baton, and Tiger's bullet whip. So Wiley Kid started to have a second thought and told her brother, I don't think this is a good idea. Well, if we wanted to prove just how adult we are, Wiley Cat said, we had to prove that we can use these, he said. So what Wiley Cat had told his sister that he's getting sick and tired of being a kitten, and so was she. But she still doesn't think it's a good idea to take the elders' weapons without asking. So she went along with it anyway. So, after leaving Cat's lair, that's when Wiley Cat told his sister that he knows a place where they can practice. So they head off on their spaceboards. But they had no idea that watching them were the mutants. Sly, the leader of the mutants, along with Monkey and Jackalman. So back with the Thunderkins, now that they found a place to practice, so what Wiley Cat did is that he uses the Bowler Whip first. At first it started out fine, but then Wiley Cat started to fall. But luckily for his sister, she saved him when she did. So, after landing on the ground intact, that's when Wiley Cat had admitted by pleading his case to say, maybe I should have started something more simple. So then it's Wiley Cat's turn to try out the baton. So as Wiley Kid takes her turn on the baton for a while, she did all right, but that was until a board comes into their direction and they moved out of the way. They being Wiley Kid and Wiley Cat. Well, long story short, back with the Thunderkins who avoided the board for the second time, and that's when they had no idea that watching them were the mutants. After they pleaded the case to say this is going to be as hard as they thought. So after long story short, Slythe had told the mutants to get the Thunder Kittens. So back with Wily Cat, he tries to whip again to make himself invisible, just like what Tigra did. But nothing happened. So long story short, after Wily Cat's attempt to make himself invisible failed, that's when back with his sister Wily Cat, she's face to face with Slythe, the mutants leader. But luckily for her, she was saved by Chutar's baton, of course. Well, good news Wily Kit made it, but now here comes the bad news. The mutants soon surround the Thunderkittens, but instead they got away and the mutants collided. So Wily Cat, now that he and Wily Kit are safe, for now anyway, he decides to tie up Jackalman with the bolo whip. But unfortunately it has little effect. Then he tried the nunchucks next, but that didn't work. Instead, he gets grabbed and then the nunchucks got stolen. But luckily for Wiley Kid, she still has the baton. So she and her brother had defended themselves the best way they knew how, from the mutants, of course. Back with Sly, the mutants' leader, he pleaded his case with the kitten, Wily Kid, to put the baton down before she hurts herself. Well, the only one that's going to get hurt is you, Sly, Wily Kid said when it's her turn to plead her case, while her brother's right behind her. So long story short, after Wily Kid had done her little trick with the baton and asked the question to Sly, are you convinced yet? Not yet, I'm not, Sly said. And then, long story short, the kittens are trying to get away. Luckily for Wily Cat, she did manage to get away from a monkey, and too bad she lost a baton on the way. So, long story short, after the Thunderkittens had a battle with the mutants, they managed to get away. The kittens, that is. Then meanwhile at Cat's lair, they're now sitting in the hallway ashamed with guilt and regret, wondering how they're going to explain all this. So why did Cat win first to speak in his case to say, "Oh boy, if the Thundercats found out what we did, they'll never trust us again. How could we have been so stupid?" Wily Kid asked, and that's when Lionel approached him. So Lionel asked, "What are you two doing?" At first Wily Cat hesitated. He says, "Oh, nothing. In that case, let me check the weapons." Uh, don't do that, Wily Kid said, and then made a suggestion. "Let us check them for you." "That's a good idea," Lionel says. "Here's the checklist. You better get 'em right, otherwise Pedro will have all of our heads." So that's what the Thundercats did, but instead of doing that, they went to Castle Plunder to try to get them back. The weapons, that is. So later that night at Castle Plunder, when the kittens had arrived at Castle Plunder, that's when they spotted one of the mutant guards. So meanwhile, inside the castle, that's when Mungan was talking about how he and the mutants are going to attack the Thundercats, and they have the Thundercats weapons, but also one of the spaceports. Long story short, the Thunderkins were busy climbing up from outside the castle. Back inside, that's when Jacqueline suggested to get a map for Cat's Lair so they could plan a surprise attack. Now, don't ask me how he and the mutants got it. I honestly don't know. So Jacqueline went ahead and got a map. So back with the Thunderkins, they now made it inside the castle, and by how? Through a window. And so when they looked around, the room was empty, for now anyway. But when the Thunderkins saw that Jacqueline of the mutants was coming, they decided to hide. And speaking of Jacqueline back with him, he opened up the trunk to get the battle plans. So, back with Jacqueline, once he got the battle plans out of the trunk, he soon left the room. But he had no idea that Thunderkins, oh, they found a place to hide all right, but from outside of the castle. So, back with the kittens, they went inside the castle again, only to find out that they couldn't open the door because the door was locked. So, back with the mutants, Slide had pleaded his case to say, without the Thundercats' weapons, they'll be powerless. Back with the Thunderkittens, that's when, aha, they came up with a plan. So long story short, after the Thunderkittens had got into the ventilation shaft, back with the mutants, that's when Monkey has his turn to plead a case, and he's not wrong, to say that the Thundercats will not be given up so easily. So Sly, the leader of the mutants, had pleaded his case to ask a question. "You're not scared, are you, Monkey?" And Monkey said no. And he says, "I'm just here to warn you. The Thundercats might be looking for their weapons and may try to get it back." "That's a smart suggestion," Sly said. In the meantime, back with the Thunderkins, they're still in the ventilation shaft at the castle. In the meantime, Sly just told Jackalman to make sure that all the doors and windows are locked, and so Jackalman heads off. Still in the ventilation shaft were the Thunderkins, so Wily Kid wanted to know from his sister what was going on, but she shushes him. So back with Monkey, and he was busy practicing on the nunchucks that was stolen, and then he decided to practice a script that he wants to save to Lionel the moment he arrives at Cat's Lair. But he had no idea that the Thunderkins are right behind him. Back with Monkey, and when he looked over his shoulder at the Thunderkins behind him, well, the kittens know what to do. They use their pallets for sleeping gas, and that put Monkey right to sleep. But wait, out of nowhere is Sly, the mutant's leader. He decided to go one-on-one with the kittens. But Sly's not alone because with him is Jackalman and the Jackalman guard. Luckily for the Thunderkittens, they managed to find a place to hide. Well, long story short, Jackalman decided to step forward towards the Thunderkins, but thinking quickly, Wily Kid threw a pellet at him, and it exploded. So, back with the Thunderkins, they now left the room. And by the time they were on their way out, they had no idea that the Jackalman guards were right behind them. So back with the Thunderkins, now they have outsmarted the Jackalman guards, the next thing they did is to go up. And so they did. So long story short, back with Slides and the mutants, that's when Wily Cat knows what to do. He threw the pellet and it landed in Slide's hand and that exploded. Back with the Thunderkittens, they're going to the roof of the castle. Long story short, now that the Thunderkittens knew that there's a trap door, at the same time back with Slides and the mutants, they continued their pursuit. Back with the Thunderkittens, good news for them, they made it to the castle's roof. Now here comes the bad news. They're surrounded by Sly, Jackalman, and the mutant guards. As Sly, the leader of the mutants, gets closer and closer to the kittens, things are looking bad. But then the Thunderkittens decided to act quickly by using their ropes, of course. So now that each rope is each on Sly's arm, that's when the Thunderkittens climb themselves down. So after the kittens climbed themselves down, they left the castle, back with the feliner. Now don't forget we have Chitara, Panther, and Snarf that was still there, and so was Tigra. And they just let Lionel know in the control room at Castler that everything's fine and they're coming back. No rush, Lionel said. So meanwhile in the Castler's control room, remember the Thunderkins that just left the castle moments ago? Well, Wiley Kid just went first to speak in her case to say that she and her brother had done something really dumb, and they decided to confess. Now, whether they did or not, I can't say for sure, but it's confirmed that they did. Back at Castle Plondar, that's when Monkey and Jackalman just said that the Thundercats will be back for their weapons soon enough. And of course, Slythe was more than delighted to hear the good news from the mutants. That was after Monkey had pleaded his case to say they'll be bringing some help. Back at the Kessler's control room, although it is confirmed that the kittens did tell Lionel what they've done, so he decided to reprimand them, and so they apologized for this mistake and wished that it never happened. Never mind, Lionel said. I'll decide for your punishment later, but right now we gotta find a way to get those weapons back, he said. So that means, aha, Lionel has a plan. So, back at Castle Plondar, so even though the plan was never explained, so what the kittens did is that they decided to meet it on the top of the castle. As for Lionel, he can climb up and meet them. So that's what happened. Meanwhile, inside the castle, Monkey and other mutants just told Slide, the leader, that the Thundercats had arrived. Back with the Thunderkins that were inside, they were in the exact same room where the trunk was just moments before. But this time they found it weird that the door was unlocked. Because Wally Cat says to his sister that there's no way that the mutants can expect them back so soon. And you know something? He's not wrong. So decided to think nothing of it, so the Thunderkins went to investigate. So that's what they did. But then suddenly what they didn't realize is that by the time that the Thunderkins left the room, Jackalman was in the trunk, and he just came out of it. So, back with Lionel, who was still outside at the moment until he found his way in. And that's when both he and Wily Cat decided to follow Wily Kid. So that's what they did. But unfortunately for Lionel and the Thunder Kittens, what they didn't know is that by the time they left the room, Monkey and other mutants was also there. So he decided to follow them. By the time that Lionel and the kittens had arrived at the room where the table was sitting in, the weapons were gone. The table was empty. Wily Cat finds this very weird and then told Lionel they were just here moments ago. But then by surprise the mutants show up. So Slythe went first to ask Lionel a question. Are you looking for something or just a social call? So Slythe attacked first, but then he misses, and that's when Wily Cat had tied up Monkey and other mutants with his rope. So long story short, after Wily Cat had used her rope to tie up Jackalman, it's just Slythe and Lino. So Slythe began attacking Lino, but then he misses, and then Lino gets onto the assassin table as the Thunderkittens did, and that's when he pulled out his sword. So while that's going on, that's when Lionel looked at the Thunderkins and says, "Go look around. I'll hold them off." And so that's what the Thunderkins did, and they head off. So after the Thunderkins head off, it's Lionel against the mutants and the mutants' guards. So The battle between Lionel and the mutants and the guards went on and on and on and on and on, with his sword, of course. So, back with Wily Cat, long story short, all he found were snakes, in the pit, of course. So he ran off. Meanwhile, Wily Kit's in the castle's kitchen. But by the time she opened the doors, there were a bunch of skulls everywhere, collapsing on her. Meanwhile, back with Lionel, he's now face to face with Jackalman of the mutants. So back with Wily Cat, and when his sister arrived, he asked her if she found any weapons anywhere, but she tells him no. But she suggested to her brother that they should keep searching, so that's what they did. Back with Lionel, he's still battling with the mutants, this time with Monkey. So, as Lionel continues to battle with Monkey and other mutants, well, let's just say that he did what any good guy would do. He projected a Thundercat signal from his sword, just like he always does. So meanwhile in the feliner we have Panthro, Chitara, Targa, and Snarf, and they are now on their way to Castle Plondar. So back with Lionel, he then looked behind him to see Slythe, Monkey, and Jackalman. Well, Monkey went first to speak in his case to tell Lionel that his friends will never arrive in time. Then, long story short, while Monkey makes this attack on Lionel, when back with him, he tries to hold on to his sword the best way he knew how, and luckily he did. Well, long story short, bad news for Lionel, he was disarmed, and that's when Jackalman has his turn to plead a case to Lionel to say that he's finished. Jackalman also pleaded a case to Lionel that this time that he and his mutants will get him for sure, or so they thought, but then Lionel decided to use smokescreen from his claw shield. Well, long story short, after the Thunderkittens show up to join up with Lionel, that's when Jackman says, "Get them!" And so the mutants had proceeded to do so. But Wily K has an idea. She threw a pellet against the mutants, but it's just water. Well, back with Monkey, and he just laughs at it and then scoffs at it. Then asks the question, "A puddle of water? Is that all?" But not so fast. What looked like a bottle of water is a gush of water that sends Monkey into the ceiling. So thanks to the gush of water that's washing away the mutants, for now anyway, so the three of them ran off. Back with Lionel and the kittens, Lionel tries to break down the door that's in front of him. So he's asking Wily Kid, how many pellets does she have left? "Well, I ran out," she answers. Well, luckily for her brother, he only has one left. When Lionel asks Wily Cat what kind it was, but he tells Lionel that he isn't sure. But luckily, the door broke down, and so the three of them head off. Lionel, meanwhile, goes to the other door to break it down, while the Thunderkittens go to the door up the front. Back with a feliner, now Snarf is getting worried and asks Panthro, "Can't this thing go any faster?" Well, Panthro just went first to speak in his case to say this is as fast as they could go, and according to Chitara, there's a bigger problem. The mega condenser is hot. Well, back with the Thunderkins who are continuing to look for the Thundercats' weapons, then she realized, now I know where they are. So she and her brother went to tell Lionel about it. She said, "Follow me quick," and so the three of them head off. But when the Thunderkins and along with Lionel had arrived in the exact same room where the kittens had left from twice, the trunk was empty. She was horrified and says, "I could have sworn they were in there." If that's not bad enough, the window's boarded up. Well, luckily for Lionel, he manages to close and lock the door before the mutant guards can arrive. Well, that's going on. Lionel takes the boards off the window. In the meantime, the mutant guards are trying to ram down the door. So after Lionel takes the boards off the window, he told the kittens to leave, but they refused. The mutants continued to break down the door. So while Lionel braces himself against the door, but he's not alone because the kittens are with him, and Wily Kid just pleaded her case to say there's no way we're leaving you. So by the time that the mutants broke down the door, things are looking bad. But luckily for Wily Cat, remember that last pellet? Well, luckily he used it. And guess what? It's laughing powder. And no wonder the trunk was empty because by surprise, the mutants got the Thundercats' weapons. So while the mutants are busy laughing, and thanks to Lionel and the Thunderkins, they managed to get the Elder's weapons back. Now outside the castle, that's when Lionel says, if you hurry, you can get to the lair first before they do. And so they ran off. Oh, by the way, Lionel got his sword back on the way. So by the time that the feliner had landed, Solon says, well, it sure took you all long enough. What happened? Snarf asked when he came out first. Are you okay? He asked. Well, Lionel not only says that he's fine, but he says, well, you don't have to hurry back on my account. This is no time for a joke, Snarf said. Because, as Snarf says in his case, and to coin a phrase, the mutants are nothing to laugh at. He's not kidding. So the next morning, back at Cat's lair and in the control room, so Lionel explained to the Thundercats and Snarf what had happened. He said he had to step out, but then he ran into the mutants, by accident, of course. And that's when Snarf had to ask the Thunderkittens a question of where were they when Lionel needed them. So Lionel explained before the kittens had pleaded their case. He said that they were doing something in the weapons room for him as a favor. Now Chitara sensed that something was off and asked the kittens what was wrong with them, and then they hesitated. Then Lionel says, well, they're just bored that they're missing out on an adventure, he explains. Then Panthro has his turn to plead his case and says, I guess things are pretty boring for you. I'll tell you what we'll do. And he suggested a weapons practice, but they refused. So you know what this means. The Thunderkins had changed their minds. I think what the kittens mean, Lionel explains, is that they have a lot to do the next day, like finish cleaning up in the weapons room, he suggested. Then Lionel also suggested to teach them a lesson about weapons safety and responsibility. So yes, it is true, the Thunderkins had learned their lesson, that the next time they want to borrow some things, it's better to ask first and to put them back, instead of taking things without permission. So that ends episode 62.